Welcome back to Talk of the Town, and I am joined now by our news partner, Phil Anderson for U.S. Senate. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Ellen.
And today we're going to cover privacy.
Yes.
And it's, a really big topic, a lot of layers, but I want to start off with, do we have a constitutional right to privacy?
We do, although the Constitution doesn't mention privacy specifically.
Sure.
Certainly the Fourth Amendment in its statement that we should be free from illegal searches and seizures implies that. And I think it's safe to say that the founders, that wrote the Constitution and our Declaration intended for us to have a right to privacy based on their general idea of we being free citizens and free to conduct our own affairs as we choose. I think that makes sense.
Do you think that right is being violated?
It's certainly being violated every single day. The most common ways that people think about privacy invasions are things like internet privacy, which of course has been a big issue over the last few years, with data being farmed and
Sure.
given by Google and whoever else to the government. Other things that are the way that the government invades our privacy in terms of even telling us how we should eat, what we should eat, drink, and smoke. Those are things that violate our privacy. As well as who we should marry. That's been a big issue recently as well. And all of those things are ways that the government, for whatever reason, thinks that they have the right to invade our privacy when, in fact, they don't.
That's really interesting because I think you're right. People, when you think about privacy, you think about your cell phone and your computer.
Sure.
But there are many dimensions to privacy and how people lead their lives, really. Very interesting. And so how do you think our right to privacy works with the need for police, their need to investigate crimes and terrorism?
Well, especially since 9/11, but to a certain extent before that, there's been this justification put forward by Democrats and Republicans alike, for the most part, that we need to give up some of our privacy for the sake of being safe. Now, we've seen over the last 15 years that they haven't used what we've given them in terms of our privacy very well. We've still had domestic terrorist incidents, and we haven't been able to prevent them. And we haven't had, really any increase in our general ability to protect ourselves at all. So the whole trade-off is kind of ridiculous. If it were effective, that might be an argument. But I would argue, and I think any libertarian would argue, that the right to privacy trumps defense in a certain way. It trumps that safety. If we can be held hostage by these anti-privacy regulations and rules, then we're not a free people anymore. And we need to be able to exercise that in order to be the people that we are made to be.
And I know you kind of touched on this as well, but how does the Democratic Party and the Republican Party kind of see this issue of privacy?
Well, they've both attacked it, generally in different ways. Republicans have been happy to tell us what to eat, drink, or smoke, who to marry over the years. Democrats have been involved in our personal finances. They're not public, they're private. What I make is the fruit of my labor. I should be able to dispose of that how I choose, and that's not been the philosophy put forward by Democrats. But in terms of internet privacy and the Fourth Amendment, they both violated that willingly over the course of the last 15 years with this idea that it's for our safety or for defense or counterterrorism or whatever. But they're both happy to do that. Neither party really represents a true free person ideology anymore, the way that libertarians do.
And so kind of like you just touched on right there, how does the Libertarian Party differ from those two main parties?
Well, we see, as we've mentioned in previous Talk of the Towns, that rights reside in the individual and can only be delegated to the government by consent. So there's no general right by a government, by a majority of people, to invade our privacy. That's something that has to be delegated individual by individual to whoever, whether they decide to use Google, whether you decide to submit information to the government or be subject to searches or seizures or whatever. Those are all things that reside with the individual, but Republicans and Democrats see it as something that they can, just by majority vote or in an emergency, so-called emergency, invade our privacy in those ways.
Now, Phil, we've only got about 30 seconds here, but I want to hear about what you plan to do as senator on this issue.
Well, I'm going to fight like crazy to get rid of any government spying on through the internet, through data buys from Google or whoever. And in regards to the other things as well, we should be free to eat, drink, smoke what we want, marry who we want. All of those things that are essential to a free person need to be returned to the free person and not be infringed on by the government. So in all those ways, I'm going to always steadily fight for those things in the United States Senate as a matter of principle.
Phil Anderson for U.S. Senate, thank you for being with us today and talking about this topic.
Excellent. Thanks, Ellen.
We'll be back with more here on Talk of the Town right after this.